Starting to snow. Looks like we have a nice weekend coming up. I hope everyone's having a really good weekend. So we're going to jump into yet another Patreon listener question. And if you are interested in asking a question on the podcast, just be sure to check out the Patreon link in the description below. We have a lot of cool stuff, and you could ask something that could be fleshed out in all its entirety. And here we got a question from, let's pull it up right now. We have a question from TheGreySkull, and he wants to know, I was recently at Ener-Con in Winnipeg, which is a small Transformer convention in northern Canada that has been around for a couple years now. When I told my other friends I was going to the show, they said they were not interested because it was too small and it didn't have big name guests. I went to it and I had a great time with a lot of great people and was wondering your take on Transformer conventions since you've said you've been to quite a few in the past. What makes a good Transformer convention? TheGreySkull. Wow. Okay. So first, when it comes to my experience with Transformer conventions, I've been to every Botcon minus one since 2001, and I've been to practically every TFcon ever. And that goes all the way back to also 2001, 2002. I missed that very first one in the hockey rink, the legendary one. I've also been to HasCon, which is, I guess you could consider a Transformer convention. But I've never been to the likes of EnterCon or Auto Assembly. I've never been to any of those ones, and I've never been to EnterCon. Although, again, I would have loved to go to all of those. Now, so my experience really is TFcon and Botcon in large doses, and the one scant HasCon. And of course, when it comes to other I've been going to conventions since I was a child because my father used to bring me to toy conventions and stuff back in the early days of the late 80s and early 90s. So what makes a good Transformer convention, now that you kind of have an idea of where I'm coming from with this? It really has to do with the individual, in my opinion. Everyone has different goals at what they want when they go to a Transformer convention. And I find that those different people have different expectations. And sometimes I feel some of those expectations could lead to different ways they could have went about it. So there's some people that literally just go to conventions just to get the exclusives. That's all they want. They just want to get the exclusives. And I've said many times, like people who go to cons just for the exclusives and don't really care about the dealer room or the panels or the social interaction. I always say you're kind of, I mean, when you really think about it from a monetary standpoint, you're almost kind of better off staying at home and just getting it online afterwards from eBay. I mean, yeah, sure, there might be a markup, but at the same time, it's like, think about it. Travel to the con, hotel, the entry to the convention, food. I mean, all of that is definitely way more than a markup and shipping from a guy selling on eBay of any exclusive, whether it be Botcon exclusives back in the day or third-party TFcon exclusives or anything, or HasCon's current stuff. So I've always felt that if you're there for the exclusives, I think that there's a much cheaper way to go about it. There's people that are there for the dealer room. You know, they don't have the opportunities, let's say, to really use eBay. They feel eBay's too expensive. Maybe they don't have a PayPal account. Who knows? You know, sometimes you don't know their situation with credit or PayPal. So they just, and maybe they want to, tangibly feel the product in their hands before they buy it. Some people are like that too. So for them, the deal room is a big deal because it gives them a good chance to see the product, touch the product, get a feel for the product, and just be able to make that decision there and then and there, and no tax, so it's, and no shipping. So it's something, they look for deals and they feel that a deal room could possibly give them that, the deals from the dealer room. There's a group of people that are there for guests. For them, it's, the only time they'll ever be able to see some of their favorite voice actors or artists will be at a convention. They won't get those opportunities to get original art or get something signed if that's not the case, from these things. And I think the last one, and they kind of share together, but it's the panels and the social interaction, which is for some people the ability to have panels and discussions and the events mixed with the social interaction that happens during the show and even more so in the evenings is a big deal for them. And I know for a lot of people who used to be regulars at BotCon, that was the big selling point for them, was just to see friends that they'd only see maybe once a year because of BotCon. So you take all of those and then you pretty much create your own profile of who you are and what's important to you. So like to give an example, for me personally, it's a little bit of everything. When I go to a BotCon back in the day, it was, did I want the exclusives? Of course I did. Did I want to find cool stuff in the dealer room to like complete my collection at the time? Let's give an example like BotCon 2001, my first BotCon. I picked up the exclusive RC figure, which was the repaint of Transmetal 2 Black Arachnia. But I also went to the deal room and bought a whole bunch of cool Japanese stuff that I would normally never get an opportunity to get. And eBay just really wasn't pouring with it at the time. Tony Preto had such an amazing table, of stuff. Oh my God, all his stuff that he had there. And Azusa and everybody. So, so there's that too for me. To be able to see the guests, to be able to meet guests and stuff like that. There was a pretty good Beast Wars year. So to be able to meet all of those guests and stuff, that was a big deal for me. And to get those autographs that were free. At the time with BotCon, autographs were free. The panels, I love the panels. Educational panels, learn stuff, discussion. And then, of course, the last one being seeing friends that I only get to see once a year because of distance and the fandom. And this is before the days of social media, where it was a lot easier to communicate. You pretty much had to get to an MIRC board, or if, this was like the early days of MSN even, and ICQ. So communication was not as easy back then outside of emails and message boards and stuff like that. And even message boards were kind of in their infancy in 2001. So it for me, it was a combination of a lot of things. And that's what made me keep going back every year without hesitation, was because of that. But I mean, let's look at EnterCon, right? So you mentioned EnterCon, how your friends didn't want to go because they felt it was too small and they didn't have big name guests. Well, maybe that's what's their goals, EnterCon, to my knowledge, doesn't have any third-party exclusives. I know that they have a custom class that you could participate in. And they did, it was Wasp from Animated, but they used the G1 Bumblebee mold, which was pretty clever. So, they have a custom class. They have a modest size dealer room, not a very big one, but a modest size dealer room. They don't have any big name guests, but there's the social aspect. There's people there that you could hang out with. When you're walking through that door, everyone's a Transformer fan like you. So it really is your goals. If you're looking for exclusives, yeah, maybe EnterCon might not be for you, but I think the dealer room should serve you to a degree of what you're hoping to find, hopefully. And again, even that in itself is unique to individuals, because Transformers is such a diverse brand now in terms of what you could buy. It's not just, used to be back in the day, like, again, BotCon 2001, you're walking to that dealer room, you're either a G1 guy, a Beast Wars guy, a Beast Machines guy, or a car robots in disguise guy. And then in between that, all the Japanese or stateside exclusives in relation to that. So there wasn't much that you could dig into. Today, now you got third party, you got trading cards, you got plush. There's so many different ways you could tackle it, and art, original art. It's so different. And, EnterCon, again, it really has to do with the individual and what they're looking for. I mean, the truth is, to give you a fact of truth, BotCon 94, the very first BotCon, their very first BotCon, they only had one guest, and it was the marketing director of Hasbro. He came by to check it out. It was Tom Bowman. But then BotCon 95, BotCon 96, no guests, zero, nothing. But they had that deal room and they had the exclusives. So, if you're a guest person, would you say that BotCon wasn't worth going to? No, because there was the social interaction and everything like that. Obviously, in BotCon 97, when we were knee-deep in a, best-selling Beast Wars year, that BotCon was, like, legendary. I mean, it had Peter Cullen, it had David Kay, Venus. It had Simon Furman, Andrew Wildman, Stan Bush, Vince DiCola, Bob Forward. I mean, just that BotCon 97 year was incredible. But, you know, those previous BotCon years, those humble early BotCon years, they had no guests, but it didn't stop the show from being awesome. And when you look at even TFcon, I mean, TFcon, when you're talking 2002 up till about, I want to say it was 2009, it was a one-day show pretty much. It was just the Saturday was the main show. And sure, there was like a Friday kind of hangout thing, but it was just pretty much Saturday was the show, and that was it. And back in the day, you just had that Saturday show, and they had maybe one voice actor if they were lucky, where there'd be like, let's say, a Gary Chalk, a Michael Bell, a Greg Berger, and then it was just the local artists. So, you know, luckily Alex Milne was a local, luckily Matt Moylan or Joe Nung at the time, or at the time even Pat Lee during those Dreamwave days, they were all locals, so they were easy guests to have as artists. But there was you know, there wasn't much even in terms of guests back then, but we still had the con and we still had a great time. So it really has to do with the individual and what is their goal, because everyone has a different goal when it comes to what they expect out of a convention and what makes a Transformer convention good. I always use, like, the thing with HasCon, like HasCon that passed 2 years ago. Did HasCon have the exclusives? Of course they did. Was HasCon this big, crazy convention with thousands of people? Of course it was. Did it have guests? Oh man, did it have a guest list? Tons of guests. Like, it had Peter Cullen, Frank Welker, Stan Lee, you know, Wahlberg was there from the Transformer movies. Like, just tons of guests. Designers, everything. Did it have a deal room? Very limited deal room. Would I say that HasCon is something you should go out of your way to go to? Not really. And that's my own personal opinion. I had a great time, but it's also a quick drive away for me. So I would constantly do HasCon only because of how close it is. But I wouldn't suggest someone, let's say in California, to fly across the continent or the country even, to go to Rhode Island to just pick up some exclusives and then maybe meet Peter Cullen and stuff. And especially if you're not someone that's into the social aspect, which unfortunately HasCon wasn't really designed to, you know, there wasn't like a con hotel either. So it wasn't really designed for that either. I mean, sure, you could find a place you could go congregate and hang out and talk, but it wasn't really designed for that because it was an all-in-one convention. So, you know, not everyone there is for Transformers also. It might be My Little Pony, Trolls, Magic the Gathering. I mean, it still was fun. I loved it. But, again, what was my goals? How close was it for me? It's different for everybody. But so even though HasCon had the exclusives, it had the guests, it still wasn't, in my opinion, something that I would tell a lot of people to go to because it has other things that might not work out for that individual and they might feel it's a waste of money. So it really depends on the person. It really depends, GreySkull, because different people have different needs. And, you know, I mean, if you're like, I'm going to give a shout out. There's this one guy who comes to TFcon every year. His name's Mark, and Mark is known as the autograph guy. He gets everything autographs. He has a really nice Transformer collection. And he also does a lot of great photography at all the panels. Mark loves guests. He loves autographs. He loves the guests panels with the guests. That's his thing. And I can't imagine Mark wanting to go to shows that probably had 0 guests. So that's Mark's goal. And then I have my buddy Tony. You've probably seen Tony. He's the Asian guy that hangs out with me sometimes at TFcons. Tony is a high-end Transformer collector, specifically G1 and some oddball stuff. If there was no dealer room, I don't know if Tony would be interested. He doesn't care about guests. He doesn't care about exclusives, third party. But he wants to get, you know, a G1 Guard City or a Lio Kaiser. So that's his thing. So for him, dealer room is the most important thing. And then, you know, you have some of my regular guys, and I don't want to name names with them, who stopped going to BotCon, but to them it was about the experience. It was about hanging out with their buddies, and they kind of stopped going to BotCon when their buddies stopped going. And they fizzled out of it. So it really is an individual thing. I think what people need to do is they need to figure out what they want to get out of a convention. And then that truly defines if it's good for them. It doesn't necessarily mean a convention is good or bad. I think BotCon is great, was great. I think TFcon is great. And I think HasCon serves different areas of purposes depending on the individual and what they need out of it. I think if you're a Magic the Gathering fan, I think HasCon is great personally. But for Transformers, I don't know about that one. But at the same time, you know, it really has to do with other things too, like financials, and you have the time for it. But at the end of the day, it really is a case-by-case basis. And when people say, oh, that convention's not any good, I think you need to really evaluate where they're coming from when they say something like that. Because what might be good for you at a convention might not necessarily be favorable for them. And that really is my long, short answer of that is, what is important to you when it comes to a convention? And then see if that convention meets those needs. I mean, I love hanging out with people. I love talking with people. I love getting exclusives. I love finding rare stuff. I love meeting guests. So conventions usually give me all that. I would have loved to go to DairyCon or EnterCon. EnterCon might not have the guests. They might not have the exclusives. They might not have a crazy dealer room, but they have the people. And I'd love to hang out with the people. I'd love to chill with them and talk Transformers and, you know, just have a good time. So, but that's me. I'm a very talkative individual, anyone who's ever hung out with me. So I'm a very talkative person. So something like that is enjoyable for me. But people who don't really like, you know, socializing, or they're just really into it for one thing or another, it might not be the case. So that's pretty much it. I think I've gone long enough on this one. But thanks, GreySkull, for the question. This was a really good one. And I hope that helps you understand what makes a good Transformer convention for an individual.